So today, we're going to jump into something pretty fascinating. It's a dense philosophical lecture from way back in October 1987. And what's so interesting is that it lays out the core beliefs of a brand new spiritual movement, a movement that was basically still in its infancy, but was already getting a ton of attention. Let's get into it.
Get this. Just 1 year. That is all it took for this new movement to absolutely explode in popularity. I mean, the growth was so explosive that the founder was getting something like 3 to 5,000 letters every single month. It became pretty obvious that without a really strong, clear framework, the sheer energy of it all could just swallow the movement whole. Okay, so what do you do with that kind of crazy interest? Do you throw the gates wide open and just capitalize on it? Nope. They did the exact opposite. They actually made it harder to get in. And that's the big puzzle we're going to explore today. Why would they do that? Well, the answer is kind of the first big idea we're going to tackle, a deliberately difficult path. The founder explained this wasn't about being exclusive or elitist. It was about carefully building a model for the future with those first few thousand members. This initial group, they had to be the blueprint. And believe me, when I say rigorous, I am not kidding. There was a formal entrance exam. You had to read, over 10 books just to apply. Then, if you got into the seminars, your participation was evaluated and judged really harshly. And the final step, the founder personally reviewed every single application. Talk about a high bar to clear. But this is where it gets really fascinating. This whole system, it wasn't just some academic hurdle. The passing standard for that beginner seminar was actually designed to mirror the level of enlightenment someone would need to enter the fifth dimension in the spirit world. It was basically a spiritual aptitude test. And, it just keeps going up from there. The intermediate seminar, even tougher. The standard for passing that level was mapped to the enlightenment needed to get into the sixth dimension, which is a much, much higher realm in their belief system. And then you get to the very top, the advanced seminar. The goal there was to find people who had reached the Arhat level, which is a state of incredibly high enlightenment. So what you have here is this incredibly practical, real-world map of a spiritual journey. So what were they really measuring with all this? The lecture is super clear about it. It had nothing to do with how smart you were in a worldly sense, or your education, or your social status. The only thing they cared about was something called true merit, and they defined that as the enthusiasm for seeking the Dharma, or, the ultimate truth. It was all about your passion, your spiritual hunger. And this leads us right into our second big idea, a philosophy that basically takes our society's values and just flips them completely upside down. I mean, just think about it. In our world, we measure people by their job titles, their degrees, their career success. The lecture points out that you'd have these really high-achieving people, professors, doctors, and they would get so confused when they didn't do well in the seminars. Why? Because in this spiritual framework, none of that stuff matters. The only thing that moves the needle is your enthusiasm for truth. There was just zero correlation. And the founder had this incredible metaphor for it. He said, the world's value system is often a pyramid that has been turned upside down. From that spiritual perspective, the things our society puts on a pedestal often have no real lasting value. Wow, that's a pretty profound and challenging idea, right? Okay, so let's say you've got this incredible truth, one that flips the whole world's value system upside down. Who do you trust with that? How do you make sure it's protected and passed on correctly? And that's where their long-term vision kicks in, a legacy built to last for millennia. See, the point wasn't just to build a movement for right now. The goal was to create a teaching, a Dharma, that would stay pure and uncorrupted for literally thousands of years. And just look at the timeline they're thinking about. The mission was to set up a perfect model today so that it could guide people 100 years from now, preserve the truth 1,000 years from now, and act as a beacon of light 2,000 years in the future. When you're planning for 2,000 years in the future, you can see why they felt like they couldn't afford a single mistake at the very beginning. So how do you pass something like that on? The lecture is absolutely clear. It's not about family ties or worldly connections. It is only passed from enlightened to enlightened. The lecture gives this perfect example of a Chinese master named Huigo, who passed his sacred teachings on to a Japanese monk, Kukai, a total foreigner he had just met. Why? Because he recognized Kukai's immense spiritual merit. That was the only thing that mattered. Now, to spread a teaching this demanding, you need a pretty unique way of looking at the world. And that brings us to our fourth big idea, the belief that there are no enemies, only people who are unawakened. And this brings us to one of the most powerful statements in the whole lecture. On this earth, there is not a single enemy of truth. I mean, that sounds completely wild in a world filled with so much conflict, doesn't it?
But it all comes down to how you redefine enemy. From this perspective, someone who seems like an enemy isn't an evil person. They are simply a child of God who has not yet awakened to the truth within them. And boom, that changes everything, right? Suddenly, any opposition you face isn't coming from malice, it's just coming from a lack of awareness. Spreading the truth is no longer a battle you have to win, it's an act of helping someone else wake up. Okay, so let's boil this entire philosophy down to its core. The lecture wraps up by revealing the two great principles that are the foundation of enlightenment and real happiness: harmony and progress.
Now, at first glance, these two ideas might seem like they're total opposites. You've got the principle of harmony, which is all about a sense of equality. And then you have the principle of progress, which is all about a sense of fairness. So how can those two things exist at the same time? Well, let's break it down. The principle of harmony says we all start from the same place. We're all children of God. We all have this divine spark, this infinite potential. Because of that, you can't just step on other people to get ahead. You have to contribute to the happiness of everyone. But then the principle of progress steps in and says that even though we all start equally, our effort and hard work will naturally lead to different results. And according to this lecture, that difference is a form of cosmic fairness.
And that really leaves us with this huge, provocative question that sits at the heart of this whole worldview. How can a system be perfectly equal and perfectly fair at the same time? Is it actually possible for a system to be perfectly equal at the start, but also perfectly fair in its results? A world where we all start at the same line, but don't all finish in the same place. And for that to be considered just, that's something to think about.